Hello and welcome to the Nexus. Today it's the greatest show on earth. No, not the Nexus, but the World Cup. Or more precisely, FIFA, the men and women who run it. The tournament's looking pretty good so far, you have to admit. But what's going on behind the scenes? Can we now trust FIFA after years of scandals? Plus, can anyone break the FIFA monopoly on football? There's billions to be made if you have the brains and the nerve. And finally, politics and football, political football. Nike ticks off Iran, putting the boot in just before their big game. Iranians are outraged, but did it make any difference? All that and more, here in the Nexus. Hello, I'm Matthew Moore, and today in the Nexus, it's FIFA, putting on a really exciting show in Russia so far. But what about behind the scenes? Well, we're kicking it about with our own star players, including Juliet Bawuah, who's interviewed FIFA's new boss recently. We also have Chris Deeley here in London. He writes online for the very popular 90minute.com. And finally, the writer the writers like to read, Tim Vickery, who's been following the game from Brazil for the last 25 years. So now we're all gathered. Let's find out if we can trust FIFA, starting with this quick reminder of the darkest chapter of the governing body. This is the first World Cup since the 2015 scandal which shamed FIFA and ended the career of its longtime leader, Sepp Blatter. That dark period began in 2010 when Russia and Qatar were awarded the World Cup. After 2 years of allegations of bribes and vote rigging, FIFA finally caved in, hiring the US attorney Michael Garcia to investigate. It took Garcia more than 2 years to write his 430-page report, yet FIFA boiled it down to 42 pages and effectively cleared Russia and Qatar of any wrongdoing. Garcia promptly resigned. Meanwhile, the FBI was about to join the game. They'd been watching the US FIFA official Chuck Blazer, who was so rich he could afford 2 apartments in Trump Tower, one just for his cats. In 2011, FBI agents confronted him, offering him a choice: cooperate with our football investigation, or we'll have you on tax fraud. Blazer quickly agreed to become an informant, and he admitted that he and other FIFA officials had accepted bribes, but this was for the South African World Cup bid in 2010. His information led to the raids in Zurich in 2015. On the eve of FIFA's annual Congress, and with all the organisation's top brass gathered, the FBI and Swiss authorities pounced, raiding their 5-star hotel and arresting or indicting 14 officials, including FIFA Vice President Geoffrey Webb.
The 47-count indictment against these individuals includes charges of racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering conspiracies spanning 2 decades.
This really is the World Cup of fraud, and today we're issuing FIFA a red card.
Most of the officials pleaded guilty and agreed to hand back millions in cash. And barely a month after the raid, FIFA's president himself resigned. A humiliating end after 17 years at the top. A few months later, FIFA banned Blatter from football for an alleged illicit $2 million payment made in 2011 to Michel Platini, who was then the head of Europe's governing body, UEFA. Soon after, FIFA accused Blatter and his associates of running a coordinated effort to enrich themselves. Through bonuses and salary increases, they had allegedly received $80 million over 5 years. Blatter's replacement, Gianni Infantino, promised that FIFA had turned the page. The whole world, he said, would soon applaud FIFA for cleaning up its act.
The image reputation of FIFA, which of course at the moment is not very high, has to grow again, has to come on the top again. And we can do this only if we do football, if we live football, if we breathe football, if we work not 100 but 200, 1,000% for football.
Well, a little bit of hyperbole there from Infantino. Let's go straight to Tim Vickery. 100, 200, 10,000%, whatever. Has FIFA changed? Can we now trust it?
But we can't do this without some context. You're coming at this from the idea of corruption, but there is a geopolitical context which is important. Until '74, FIFA was a European club. Almost no places in the World Cup for Africa and Asia. In '74, there was a rebellion of the decolonialised world. In came a Brazilian, João Havelange. Blatter was his hand-picked successor with a pro-third world agenda, opening up the World Cup to 32 teams, much more places for Asia and Africa, but with a model of crony capitalism. Now, that model has led to the corruption scandals, and now there's a third era of FIFA. Infantino, who comes from European football, has come in order to win the trust of Africa and Asia. He is having to make financial promises in an environment when FIFA is losing money because of the financial scandals. So this is the question on maybe why FIFA cannot still be trusted, because it's promising to give more money, to distribute more money to the world's football associations in an environment when FIFA, because of the corruption scandals, is receiving less money.
And just finish the thought for me then. Are you saying that that means there's something endemic, there's a problem endemic in FIFA's model?
I think that there could well be. There's a problem, I think, endemic, and we'll get into this very soon, in football's global model, which is a concentration of money and power in Western Europe, but a political situation with one nation, one vote, where the political power is distributed.
Right, where
that, you
can have a very small country having the exact same voting rights as Brazil, is what you're saying there. Let's go to Chris Deeley. Chris, I want to ask you about the investigation. So the Swiss are investigating Blatter on criminal mismanagement charges. What does that mean?
Essentially, it means he's been doing his job. He was doing his job entirely improperly. You know, when it comes to FIFA, as Tim says, there's always been there was a move to promote African nations very much. Partly that's because the World Cup and the world of football needs to really be the World Cup. Partly that's because Sepp Blatter wanted to stay in power, wanted to stay in money, as it was, and that's where all the easier votes were.
Why hasn't Blatter been charged yet? I just want to show you some pictures of Blatter in Russia. This World Cup, he's going about. He's still quite the football celebrity. He doesn't seem to be under any pressure whatsoever. Why hasn't he been charged yet?
Well, I think he has considerable support in Russia, and I'm sure that Juliet will tell us that he has considerable support in Africa. And there's a certain gratitude in many countries for the way that he opened out the game to other countries. Saw the World Cup stage in Africa for the first time, for example. Well, because he's not in. Yeah.
Are they dragging their feet?
How much of the corruption can be put personally at him? Is he personally responsible? Has he received personally? I think those are some of the pertinent questions.
Juliet, actually, Tim gave me a nice little hint there. Blatter, very strong in Africa, right?
Well, very strong in Africa with the kind of things that he did for the associations, and also even with the 2010 World Cup and everything, bringing the World Cup to Africa for the first time, which I think so many Africans were happy about that.
Now, you've met Infantino, you interviewed him. Before we ask you about that, let me quickly just let our viewers know something that he said fairly recently. In fact, well, let's listen to him saying how hard it is to bring reform.
I've received threats, live threats, against me, against my family, because UEFA was acting against match fixing. Even if it's not my decision, it's the decision of the committees. I had to have police escort for my children because of the actions of UEFA in match fixing.
Well, Juliet, that's quite extraordinary. Infantino saying he was getting death threats and had to have protection for his children because he wanted to sort out match fixing. What more did he tell you when you spoke to him?
We spoke about a number of things. We spoke about racism in football, which is very crucial. We spoke about misuse of funds, which I think is very dear to the heart of football fans, how monies they give to the federations, how the monies are put in use talking about grassroots football, talking about infrastructure, because many times you ask the federations and you don't get answers to where the money is that FIFA given the federations, where it's going. So I'm sure that explains why he's.
I want to pick up on Ghana. We were talking about scandals, new scandals that are developing even under his stewardship. In Ghana, there's a problem, isn't there, with this? Well, we know that Ghana's dissolved its football association earlier this month after a documentary showing officials taking bribes. Take a look at this. Well, the Ghanaian Football Association president was filmed by the undercover journalist Anas taking a $65,000 kickback from a fake businessman. Now, he resigned from his position on the FIFA Council after they banned him from football for 90 days, but he denies doing anything wrong. Well, that's extraordinary, Juliet. I mean, you think that this would never be repeated, but here we are again. Now, what do you make of this latest scandal in Ghana?
Well, I think the scale of the rot we are talking about, the fact that over even 70 referees were also alone involved in this, it is chilling and shocking. Shocking because of the magnitude, but not because they collected bribes. These are stories we hear and ask questions daily, but for some reason are always met with denial. So,
Tim, how do we know that this World Cup then has come about? Yeah, it's great, everyone likes it, but how do we know that it's reached this point, the finals, in a clean way, and that everyone who deserved to be there is there?
Well, it's the showpiece occasion for FIFA, and one of the problems for FIFA is that the World Cup generates almost all of FIFA's money. So a lack of transparency with the World Cup, I think, would be very, very grave indeed. A lot of the problems with match fixing and so on happen lower down the scale in divisions of football where the global spotlight is not there and football generates so much money. Corruption is a normal part of business life. It would be extraordinary if it wasn't in football. But I think often the place for corruption is the second division in Chile or something like that, where there isn't the global spotlight.
You mentioned money, so let's turn to the business actually of FIFA. You know, it's been around for 114 years and clearly has monopoly control over global football. But could that monopoly ever be smashed? Well, take a look at American football for a moment. The NFL has total control, but there is a challenger. Well, here's the incredibly successful wrestling pioneer, Vince McMahon, announcing his new league to rival the NFL.
The new XFL will kick off in 2020, and quite frankly, we're going to give the game of football back to fans. The new XFL will be fan-centric, with all the things you like to see and less of the things you don't. And no doubt, a lot of innovations along the way.
Well, could we ever see a rival to FIFA like that? And would investors and fans go for it? Let's imagine what the sales pitch would look like.
Are you sick of the lies, the bribes, the expensive tickets, the overpriced merchandise? It's time to ditch FIFA. It's time for IFFE, the International Football Federation. Yeah! FIFA makes billions from the World Cup. And what do you get in return? I'll tell you what, a whole lot of bull. That's what. Do you know how much FIFA made from the last World Cup? Do you? Do you? Do you? Tell them, Marge.
Well, FIFA's accounts operate in a 4-year cycle in line with the World Cup. In the last cycle, they generated $5.7 billion in revenue. 85% came from the World Cup. That's $4.8 billion from a tournament that lasts just 1 month.
That's insane!
The majority of that was from TV broadcasting rights. Sponsorship accounted for $1.6 billion, and over $500 million was earned from ticket sales. Now that's revenue, not profit.
Just tell them the bottom line, Margie!
They have massive expenses. They spent nearly $500 million organising the World Cup. Then comes the TV production, you know, all the cameramen, the directors, executive, etc. Money to all their member associations and confederations, and big salaries to the FIFA execs.
The bottom line, Margie!
OK, they made $338 million profit.
$338 million. And this from an organization that's a registered charity and pays hardly any tax. They have more than $1.5 billion in the bank. They're loaded. So why are you paying sky-high prices? I mean, an official World Cup ball costs $175. $175. That's crazy. How is that even possible? And if you will make sure your balls are cheap, your tickets are cheap, but your football is rich. We're gonna put profits back into the game, not into the pockets of FIFA bigwigs. And what about that bidding process? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Who wants to play football in the middle of the desert? From now on, there's gonna be no more backdoor lobbying and secret voting. It's all out in the open with IFFY. We're blowing this sucker wide open. It's International Football Federation. Yeah! It's the future. Yeah! Yeah!
Well, I don't know who that maniac is, but I think I want him in charge. Tim, the truth is, a lot of money at stake here. Why hasn't anybody challenged for it?
Well, it is a possibility, and we just talked about the revenue from the World Cup, but the big cash cow for football, for global football, is European club football. And FIFA are very worried about the prospect of the European clubs breaking away. And what you would get from the European clubs breaking away is nothing like the philanthropic vision that our maniac just explained to us. It would be more expensive merchandise, more expensive ticket prices, but again, very, very focused on a few countries in Western Europe, cutting out development of the game in the likes of Africa.
Chris, you wanted to come in there, I think.
Yeah, so one thing that FIFA has done for all of its many faults is that it does give vast amounts of money to tiny nations to develop their football infrastructure. Whereas, yeah, as Tim says, something like a bigger version of the International Champions Cup, the kind of friendly tournament between all of Europe's biggest clubs that goes on in the summer, that benefits essentially nobody except those clubs.
Chris, just a layman's question here, but did FIFA put money into those countries in order to control their votes?
I would be lying if I didn't say it helped, but the fact is FIFA's mission statement is to promote football all around the world. That's what they do with that money. Well, it certainly helps.
Okay, but look, they've got $1.5 billion in the bank or something, and they've got this charitable status from when they were a tiny little amateur-type organisation. I guess I'm asking, why is everything surrounding football so expensive? I mean, fans aren't they fed up with paying so much? And couldn't some of that money, if it's really a sort of a charity status, non-for-profit, why can't they just reduce the prices of everything and then perhaps ease up on their profit margins?
Because people pay it is the short answer. When people are willing to put the money in, people will continue to squeeze. I mean, the fact is, it is charity status or not, it is a business. Football is a business.
Well, then I come back to my original question. Perhaps, Tim, you can come in here. People are willing to pay it. Why doesn't some big-time entrepreneur or crowdfunding organisation come in and try to challenge?
Because they would want people to pay more. That would be the idea. You have to come back to the question, would it be for the global good of the game, or would it be good for the pockets of those who run and own and control a handful of clubs in Western Europe?
It's weird. In every other industry I look at, since the big bang of the financial markets, you've got the breaking down of monopolies to help customers. So why are you arguing in favour of a monopoly?
Because it's an inclusive monopoly. Let European football do what it wants, and that's the end of the development of the game in Africa and in Asia. I agree with the point that Chris made, and a point that Juliet has also stressed, that FIFA's mission is to promote the game worldwide. Now, that doesn't necessarily always mean doing the most profitable thing. It means investing in grassroots. Now, FIFA does this. The problem is that so much of the money trail is not properly followed. So money generated, which should be used to develop the game in Africa and so on, too much of that ends up in private bank accounts and in private pockets.
Okay, well, fair enough. Well, look, whether you like FIFA or not, this tournament has been pretty exciting and well run so far, and despite people's concerns. Well, Russia's been praised for being a good host, lots of smiles and colour from fans there. But of course, when it comes to Russia, there's always that political element, isn't there? And it's not just Russia kicking the political football.
Wherever you look in the world, Russia's being accused or criticised by the West. annexing Crimea, interfering in the US elections, a poisoning in Britain, and accusations of homophobia and racism. But through it all, Russia kept the World Cup, and the best the Brits could do.
There will be no attendance by ministers or indeed members of the royal family at this summer's World Cup in Russia.
Prince William, the president of the English Football Association, won't be showing up. It's the first time in decades a senior royal won't be attending. But Russia seems to be coping, making friends from all over the world, and 2 wins from the home team so far. And it's not just Russia, Iran too. This year, Iran's team were left without a shoe sponsor after Nike claims they can't send them over. And it was all down to this man.
I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
Who knew Trump's Iran sanctions would have ramifications on the national football team? But they managed to get their own back after winning their opening match in the World Cup with this message. A picture can speak 1,000 words, and when Turkish players met President Erdogan in London, not all those words were positive. Mesut Ozil and İlkay Gündoğan, players for Germany, were criticised after they met the Turkish president during his election tour, giving him signed shirts. Usually midfielders, Ozil and Gündoğan had to defend themselves after German officials claimed the meeting meant they endorsed Mr. Erdogan. Some Germans called them traitors and want them to be left out of the team during World Cup matches. They've since met with German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier to clear up that they were just being polite.
Well, let's go back to Juliet now. Juliet, would you say Russia's pulled it off?
Well, I think so far so good. They've pulled it off, just like you said, and it's been action driven with a lot of pace, end-to-end football that has been played with the teams.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, Tim, let's turn to the Iranian situation. The boots were pulled by Nike because of the Iran deal being pulled apart by Donald Trump. Did it make a difference?
Well, people like to use football for political grandstanding. But for me, there's something much more powerful that comes out of the World Cup, much more powerful than any prestige that the regime gets from the tournament. It's the coming together of people from all over the world, people interacting as individuals, ordinary fans interacting as individuals and not as representatives of this or that regime. And that, for me, lasts far, far longer than any attempts that regimes make to gain political capital for these events. It's the silent work of football, bringing people together and forging international friendships that I think we probably don't talk about enough. Politics will always come into it, but for me, it's superseded, especially now that more people can travel. And look at the Peruvians. Peru in the World Cup for the first time for 36 years. Yeah. They've gone in their droves. It's the first experience out of their country for many of these people. They're making international friendships. They're telling the world that they exist. And I think that's a very healthy thing.
Chris, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, there was actually a story about one Peruvian fan worried that he wasn't going to get a ticket for a World Cup game or for one of Peru's World Cup games. So he looked up online. He found the disability criteria for one of the morbidly obese seats. Figured he had to put about 30 kilograms on before the start of the World Cup.
Oh my goodness.
Everyone, I've got a couple of colleagues out in Moscow at the moment. They said the Red Square is just flooded with Peruvian fans.
Oh, well, that's great. That's great. That's great to hear, Chris.
Incredible.
You know, Tim actually mentioned FIFA's or football's ability to bring people together all over the world. And actually, it even outperforms the United Nations in terms of how many member countries and territories it has. So which one of those countries can actually claim to be the true home of football? Now, this is where they all gulp hard and think, oh, should I be prejudiced or not? Well, if it's just done on how many times you've won, there's no question Brazil is the boss, right, with 5 World Cups. Germany, Italy, second place with 4 each. Uruguay, Argentina have 2, and then England, France and Spain have 1. Now, I don't know what your opinions are. You're from England, Tim, but you're in Brazil. Torn?
A little bit. They love using the expression here that Brazil is the land of football.
Yes.
My counter-argument is that I think almost every country is the land of football, and let it be that way. It's the global game. It brings people together. For all of the problems that it creates and the corruption scandals and so on, I think it does more good than harm.
So, Juliet, I want to come to you now. Do you think Africa has the right, or a claim at least?
You can talk about maybe Cameroon, you can talk about Nigeria, you can talk about Ghana. These three countries stand tall among other countries on the continent, but there are no minnows on the continent.
Chris, football's coming home. As a reminder.
I would love football to be coming home. No, I don't think England's been the home of football for some time now.
Of course you don't. You're a journalist and you're on TV and you're being nice. But what would you say down the pub?
No, honestly, I think the home of football now is as much as anything almost the internet. It's where so many of the conversations come around the game now. It's where so many people watch their football.
Yeah, but Chris, this may be a generational thing, but I've got news for you. The internet isn't a real place. It's not a real country, you know.
Well, you didn't ask me which country football was from. You said, where is the home?
Fair enough, Chris. OK.
Now we know.
And you live there, do you? All right, Chris, thank you very much for that. And Tim, thank you for your contribution as well. Living legend Tim Vickery there, doing it for the fans in Brazil. And Juliet, thank you for your contribution also to the Nexus. That's all we have time for this week. Don't forget you can see this episode again or all our previous episodes online. But for now, thank you for watching. Carry on enjoying your football. See you next week.